She, sweet and innocent, helps a crying child in the park. When the millionaire father sees it all, Before the story begins, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? And if you love emotional love stories, subscribe to the channel. That way you help this project grow and keep me motivated to bring more heartwarming stories. The afternoon was warm in Zilker Park in Austin. The sun filtered through the leaves of the trees, casting soft shadows on the packed dirt ground. Children were running, families were having picnics, and the sound of laughter blended with the quiet singing of birds. However, in a more secluded corner of the park, almost hidden among tall bushes and an old, out-of-service carousel, a small boy was crying alone, clutching a worn-out teddy bear. His small shoulders trembled. His eyes, green like wet leaves, were full of tears, and his breathing came in choppy sobs. He looked about 5 years old, fair-skinned, with light brown hair falling in messy strands over his forehead. No one seemed to notice him, or rather, almost no one. Emily Dawson, a 26-year-old woman who had just finished a volunteer shift with special needs children, was walking by on her way home. She carried a worn-out backpack on her back, and her wavy, loose, grey-blonde hair danced in the light breeze. She wore a plain beige hoodie and white sneakers stained by time. Her light blue eyes squinted when she noticed the scene. Without hesitation, she approached. She gently knelt beside the boy, getting down to his eye level. "Hey, little guy, are you hurt?" The boy just shook his head no, but didn't say a word. His hands clutched the bear tightly, like it was his only shelter in the world. Emily slowly extended her hand, respecting his space. "My name is Emily. I'm not going to hurt you, okay? I just want to help." The boy looked at her with a mix of suspicion and hope. Something about this woman, maybe the softness in her voice, maybe her non-judgmental eyes, made him allow her to sit beside him. "Did you lose your parents? Do you want me to help you find them?" "My daddy." He went to answer the phone. He said it would be quick, but he disappeared. Emily looked around, searching with her eyes for any adult coming. Nothing. Her heart sank. "It's okay. He's probably coming back soon. In the meantime, do you want me to sing a song?" The boy nodded shyly. Emily started singing a soft lullaby her grandmother used to teach her when she was a child. Her voice was soft like cotton, and as she sang, she gently rubbed the boy's back, who finally stopped crying. On the other side of the park, partially hidden by a tree and subtle sunglasses, a man was watching the scene, heart in shock. Nicholas Bradford III. Tall, imposing, with neatly combed dark brown hair and a trimmed beard, he wore a grey blazer over a dark t-shirt and expensive jeans. A billionaire executive known for his coldness, always too busy for emotions. Or, at least, that's what people said about him. He had left his son for a brief moment to take an urgent call from the company board. When he came back, he saw him being comforted by a stranger, but she wasn't just anyone. She was kneeling, singing with a sweetness that couldn't be faked. She wasn't in a hurry. She didn't check her phone. She wasn't trying to look strong. She was just there, truly present. Nicholas stood there, frozen. For the first time in a long while, it wasn't his company that needed his attention. It was his son, and it was that woman, a stranger in simple clothes and with sincere eyes, who was doing for Oliver what he himself couldn't do. Calm him, touch him, connect with him. Emily still hadn't noticed his presence. She kept humming, now with a gentle smile on her face as she carefully wiped the boy's little face. "Do you have a pretty name?" she asked. "Oliver," he answered in a weak voice. "Oliver, I'm glad you let me sit here with you." Across the way, Nicholas's heart tightened. The name sounded different in her voice, lighter, more full of life. He finally stepped closer, and when Emily looked up and saw that elegant man standing there, watching, her body tensed. But not out of fear, out of uncertainty. He seemed too rich, too distant. The kind of person who wouldn't look twice at someone like her, but he was the one who spoke first. "You were amazing with him." Emily blinked, surprised by the sincerity in his deep voice. "I just did what anyone would do." "No," he replied, kneeling beside his son. "Most people would have just walked by." Oliver immediately threw himself into his father's arms, but not before giving Emily a small smile, as if to say without words, "Thank you." Nicholas extended his hand to her. "I'm Nicholas Bradford, and I'd like to make you a proposal." Emily frowned. "A proposal? Do you have time for a coffee?" She hesitated, not out of fear, but because something in her heart told her that this moment would change everything. And it would. Emily was still holding Nicholas's gaze, her hands resting on her knee and her body slightly leaning forward, as if unsure whether to apologize or get up. His presence was too imposing for that simple setting. The elegant suit clashed with the dirt beneath their feet and the rusty bench just behind them, but there was something in his eyes, green, deep, intense, that didn't match his reputation as an unapproachable man. They were the eyes of someone broken inside. "Do you have children?" he asked, breaking the silence, his voice low and hoarse, as if still processing what he had seen. Emily hesitated before answering. "No, I just work with kids. And I used to be one of them, lost, scared. I just did what I wish someone had done for me." Nicholas blinked slowly, as if unsure what to do with that sentence. Emily seemed so simple, loose, slightly messy hair, faded clothes, an old backpack on the ground. And yet, there was a light in her eyes that he hadn't seen in a long time. A light of someone who had suffered but chose to stay kind. Oliver gripped his father's hand tightly and whispered, so Emily wouldn't hear, "She sings pretty." Nicholas bent down, gently touching his son's head. It was an automatic gesture, but almost disconnected, until now. "Yes, son, she sings pretty." Emily stood up softly, picking up her backpack. She was ready to leave. She had already done what she thought was right. "Thank you for taking care of him," Nicholas said, standing up as well. "Really, I'm not used to this kind of thing, with feelings like that out in the open." She gave a slight smile, not a charming or flirtatious one, but the smile of someone who understands more than they say. "It's just that most people learn to hide, but children, they feel when it's real." The sentence lingered in the air, like a stone dropped in a still lake. For a moment, Nicholas just watched her. There was something about her. The way she spoke, the way she looked at Oliver, the way she seemed to fit there in that space between father and son. That disarmed him, as if she were made of something he had forgotten existed. Lightness. Emily began to walk away, slowly following the stone path that led to the park's exit. The sun, now lower, turned the leaves golden, and the wind carried the distant sounds of children playing. Nicholas didn't take his eyes off her. That's when it happened. She stopped halfway down the path, as if something inside her whispered to look back, and when she turned her face, her eyes met his again. It was just a second, but in that second, Nicholas felt something he hadn't felt since before his wife's death. A warmth in his chest, a sudden thawing, as if the pain of years had started to ease just a little, just enough for the heart to remember what it was like to feel. Emily turned and continued on her way. She didn't know that that look would be remembered by him every night from then on. Nicholas stood there, holding Oliver. His son was asleep, and for the first time in a long while, he didn't want to go back to the office. He wanted to know who that woman was. He wanted to hear that song again. He wanted to feel again what he felt when she smiled. And that late afternoon, without yet knowing why, Nicholas Bradford understood that life was about to change, that something or someone had broken through the wall. And the wall was already starting to crumble. 2 days had passed since that late afternoon in the park, but for Nicholas Bradford, the memory of that woman was still vivid, clear, as if stuck beneath his skin. He had tried to ignore it, like he did with everything that threatened to disrupt his controlled routine. He dove into meetings, answered emails, pretended to listen to the partners' reports. But as soon as the silence of the house fell at night, there she was, her gentle smile, her steady, sweet gaze, and most of all, the effect she had on Oliver. On Tuesday morning, he made an unusual decision. He asked the security team to identify the woman who had helped his son in the park. In less than 2 hours, they had a name, a simple file, and an address. Emily Dawson, caregiver at a public nursing home in East Austin. No famous last name, no connection to his world, just a regular woman, and still unforgettable. That afternoon, while Emily was organizing Mrs. Campbell's medications, a lucid but fragile elderly woman, the door to the nursing home creaked open slowly. She looked up and felt her body freeze. Standing in the doorway, as if the place repelled and attracted him at the same time, was Nicholas. He wore dark jeans, a navy blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and held a coffee in his hands. His gaze was direct but not aggressive. There was something restless there. Emily blinked, unsure if it was real. "You followed me?" she asked, more surprised than accusing. Nicholas gave a half smile, almost imperceptible. "Actually, I looked into it. I hope that doesn't scare you." She crossed her arms, defensive. The nursing home walls were thin, privacy was scarce. Some elderly ladies were already peeking from the hallway with curious eyes. "If you came to thank me again, you already did that at the park. It's fine. I don't want anything in return." Nicholas took a step forward carefully, as if not to scare her. "I didn't come to thank you. I came to invite you for a coffee, that's all." Emily let out a nervous laugh, looking at the floor. "Do you really think I'd feel comfortable sitting with someone like you? In some fancy restaurant with people staring at me like I walked into the wrong place?" He stayed silent for a moment, absorbing her frankness. Then he spoke. "No, I think you'd hate it. And that's why I didn't insist yesterday." She looked at him, intrigued. "So why did you come here?" Nicholas placed the coffee cup on the counter next to Mrs. Campbell's blood pressure tablets. "Because I need to make you a real proposal." Emily narrowed her eyes. "What kind of proposal?" "I want you to work with me, or rather, with my son." Her eyes widened. "Sorry, what?" "Oliver needs someone like you. I have psychologists, therapists, teachers, but none of them did for him what you did in 5 minutes at that park." Emily shook her head, stepping back. "I'm not a qualified professional. I don't have a teaching degree or psychology. I only learned to care because I had to take care of myself." "Exactly," he said, voice softer. "I don't want a nanny. I want someone who sees him like you saw him that day." The words fell on her like a sweet weight. Emily swallowed hard. For a moment, she thought of her bedridden grandmother, the overdue electricity bill, the cold leftover meal from the night before. But she also thought of the risk of getting lost in a world that wasn't hers, and mostly of the fear of believing she deserved something better. "Do you really think I'm the right person?" she asked. Nicholas didn't hesitate. "I think you're the first person who truly saw my son." Emily remained silent. Someone called her from the hallway, but her mind was far away. She didn't say yes. She didn't say no either. She just looked at him, eyes full of questions. And Nicholas silently understood that this woman was a minefield of untold stories. And still, or maybe because of that, he wanted to walk through them. As he left the nursing home, Nicholas didn't know if he had just hired a new employee, but he knew, with a chilling certainty, that he had just opened a door that he might never be able to close again. Emily accepted the job with the same hesitation of someone stepping onto unknown ground. The Bradford mansion was quieter than she had imagined. Not a peaceful quiet, but a kind of emptiness that stretched through the wide, cold rooms, as if every wall carried memories no one dared to touch. On the first day, she was taken to a more secluded wing of the house, an airy room with wide windows and beige curtains that swayed gently in the wind. Nothing luxurious, but everything impeccably clean. Next door, Oliver's room, small for the size of the house, with a dinosaur. Rug and shelves full of books that looked like they had never been opened. Emily quietly put away her few clothes, and before she could finish, heard a timid knock on the door. "Can I come in?" It was Oliver's small voice. "Of course you can, sweetheart," she replied tenderly. He walked in, holding a book, and climbed onto the bed without hesitation, sat beside her, pointing to the cover. "It's about a sad dragon. Will you read it to me?" She nodded, opened the book, and began reading in the same sweet, melodic voice that had enchanted the boy. In the park, upstairs, Nicholas stopped at the top of the stairs when he heard that voice, filling the house with an almost impossible gentleness. Leaning on the railing, he stayed there for minutes, listening to Oliver's laughter, which sounded like a breath of life after so much silence. That night, while everyone slept, he walked through the hallway on the ground floor on his way to the office. As he passed the kitchen, he heard a muffled laugh. He stopped, took a few steps back, and peeked discreetly. Emily was alone, washing a glass, humming a soft melody, while gently dancing barefoot on the cold floor. She was laughing at something she had heard on a podcast, playing quietly on her phone beside the sink, laughing like someone who didn't need an audience. And there, in the silence of the kitchen, Nicholas felt something that unsettled him. Envy, not of her happiness, but of her lightness. The next day, at breakfast, Emily was serving pancakes to Oliver while Nick read the paper. He pretended to be absorbed in the news, but watched her from the corner of his eye. The way she pushed her hair back with her fingers, how she looked at Oliver with genuine tenderness, like he was the only child in the world. "Would you like pancakes, Mr. Bradford?" she asked with a polite smile. He looked up. "Just Nick and—" "Yes, thank you." Emily nodded and turned to get another serving. He kept watching. It was impossible not to. On the third day, he came home earlier and found her in the library, sitting with Oliver in her lap, reading the same dragon book, the boy's head resting on her shoulder, his breathing slow, asleep. Emily looked up and whispered, "He feels safe when I'm around." "That's good, right?" Nicholas responded, only with a look that said more than any words, but neither of them knew that the closeness growing in silence was already a spark, and sparks, when ignored for too long, turn into fire. Night fell over Austin with an unexpected storm. Thunder tore through the sky, and wind whipped at the windows of the Bradford mansion, shaking the curtains like restless ghosts. Emily had already put Oliver to bed, wrapped in his blankets, after a brief nightmare caused by the noise outside. As she walked down the hallway, the lights flickered once, twice, and then went out completely. Darkness filled the house with a strange weight, almost symbolic. Emily looked for a flashlight in the kitchen, finding one in the cabinet under the sink. She turned on the weak beam of light and climbed the stairs slowly, her heart racing. Not from fear of the dark, but from the sense that something about that night felt different. At the top of the stairs, she noticed Nicholas's bedroom door slightly open. The emergency hallway light barely lit the room's outlines, but it was enough to see him sitting at the edge of the bed, unmoving, elbows on his knees, eyes lost in the dark. She gently knocked on the door with her knuckles. "Nick?" He slowly lifted his face. His eyes, though shadowed, reflected something between exhaustion and fragility. "I'm fine," he said, but his voice faltered on the last word. Emily stepped inside, closing the door behind her. The flashlight trembled in her hand, partially lighting his face. She sat a few steps away on the soft rug beside the bed. "Doesn't look like it," she murmured, placing the flashlight on a shelf so the room would be lit only by that faint, almost intimate glow. Nick let out a deep sigh. "It's ridiculous, I know. A man like me, CEO, father, afraid of the dark." "You're not afraid of the dark, Nick. You're afraid of the silence," she said with a calmness that completely disarmed him. He didn't answer right away, just stared at a fixed point on the wall, as if there was something there only he could see. "When Emma, my wife, died, the worst part wasn't the hospital or the funeral or the empty condolences. It was coming home and hearing nothing, not her laughter, not the sound of her keys at the door, not the off-key singing she always insisted on doing in the kitchen." His voice cracked. "Just the silence, cruel, merciless." Emily slowly moved closer without making a sound and sat next to him on the edge of the bed. For a moment she stayed quiet, respecting that suspended grief. Then, with a barely noticeable gesture, she reached out and touched his hand. It was a simple touch, unhurried. But it felt like the world stopped for a moment. Nicholas's skin was cold, hers was warm, and where they met, there was something neither of them could name, a kind of silent recognition, a wordless confession. He slowly turned his face toward her, and for a second, his eyes no longer looked hard. They were full, vulnerable, human. Emily gently squeezed his fingers and whispered, "You're not alone anymore." Nick didn't reply. He just kept his eyes on hers, as if trying to understand exactly what had happened in that simple gesture. But he knew, they both knew, something had changed. When she stood to leave, his hand hesitated to let go. But it did, because even without words, that touch had said everything. She left the room without looking back, and Nicholas remained there, alone, but with his hand still feeling the warmth of her presence. And for the first time in years, the silence in that house didn't hurt so much. The day began heavy. Dark. Clouds hung over Austin like a curtain about to fall. In the Bradford mansion's garden, Oliver had left his toys scattered on the grass before running inside when the first drops started falling. Emily watched from the kitchen window, the smell of rain mixed with that of freshly brewed coffee. On the other side of the house, Nicholas was finishing a phone call in the office, his voice steady, but his thoughts already far away. For days he had felt Emily's presence like a constant breeze, soft but impossible to ignore. Thunder split the sky, and then the rain came pouring down. Emily flinched and rushed outside, forgetting an umbrella. She had to gather Oliver's toys before they got soaked. She hurried down the porch steps, her loose hair sticking to her face as she grabbed a little truck and a colorful ball. Nicholas saw her through the window. He didn't think twice. He dropped his phone on the desk, took off his jacket, and went after her barefoot, as if something inside him was pulling him. "Emily!" he shouted already on the lawn, his shirt starting to soak. She turned around laughing, her clothes clinging to her body, her eyes shining with adrenaline. "I couldn't let his dinosaur drown," she replied between laughs, holding the toy up in both hands. Water streamed down her face. Her light lipstick was nearly gone, and her eyes, free of any cover, looked even more alive. "You're crazy," he muttered, now close, his hair wet and his chest rising and falling. "Maybe a little," she answered, still smiling, but the laughter faded as their eyes held each other's too long. The rain kept falling, but there in the middle of the soaked garden, time seemed to slow down. He reached out and gently moved a wet strand from her face slowly, like he didn't want to break the moment. His fingers stopped near her cheek. Emily didn't move. "You throw me off balance," he said, voice rough, low, like a confession between thunderclaps. Her heart raced, her hands trembling as she held the toys too tightly. "Nick." "Shh," he interrupted, stepping even closer. She felt his breath, warm even in the cold rain. Her heart felt like it was about to leap from her chest. He brought his hand to the back of her neck with a surprising gentleness for a man used to controlling the world with firm commands. Their faces were inches apart. The tension was almost unbearable. And then, in a flash, Emily stepped back, quick, almost abrupt. I can't," she said, her voice choked. "I'm not like you." Nicholas frowned, confused, his hand still hanging in the air. "Not like us." She looked away, her chest heaving, the tears blended with the rain. "I come from another world, Nick. I grew up in orphanages, shelters, places where no one cared. You live surrounded by people who speak softly, wear linen, and serve expensive wine. I can barely afford a new pair of shoes." He tried to step closer, but she moved back again, like she was protecting something very old inside her. "You don't understand. A kiss now changes everything, and I have nowhere to fall if this world throws me out later." Nick didn't respond. There was no logical argument that could break that kind of pain. He just stood there, in the rain, watching as she turned her back and ran into the house, still holding the toys. And that night, he understood it wasn't enough to want to touch her. He would have to reach her from the inside. The rain from the night before had left a damp smell in the air, an earthy scent that filled the elegant halls of the Bradford mansion. Outside, the sky still carried shades of grey, and puddles in the garden reflected the melancholy grey of dawn. But inside, what weighed most wasn't the weather, it was the absence. Nicholas came down the stairs slowly, not with the urgency of someone with appointments, but with the heaviness of someone carrying something broken inside. He wore the same cotton shirt from the day before, his hair still slightly wet from a shower that hadn't fully awakened him. When he reached the ground floor, the silence that greeted him felt strange. There was no smell of toasted bread, no coffee brewing, no mug on the counter. The kitchen radio, where Emily usually played soft instrumental music while cutting fruit, for Oliver, was off. Everything was too quiet. He walked over to the side cabinet. Emily's faded blue backpack was gone. The pair of worn sneakers she always left by the door to avoid dirtying the floor were also missing. He stopped. His chest tightened. A discomfort he couldn't name settled at the base of his neck. He stepped into the breakfast nook. The table was still set, but with only two places. Emily's was empty. His eyes scanned the room, looking for any clue, and then he saw it. On the cold marble island sat a carefully folded piece of paper, resting like something out of time. The handwriting was delicate but steady, simple. "Nick." He approached with quiet steps, as if the slightest noise could change what he was about to discover. He picked up the note with hesitant fingers, unfolded it carefully. The paper smelled of lavender, just like her room. He read, "Thank you for seeing me. But some flowers weren't made for greenhouses." It was like a punch to the chest. He stood there, feeling the world fall apart in silence. Emily had gone. There was no apology, no long explanation. Just that, a painfully beautiful metaphor that said everything she couldn't speak aloud. Nicholas gripped the paper tightly until it crumpled in his hands. His eyes searched the room, trying to find any trace of her. A used napkin, a cup, a scent left behind. But she had been meticulous. She left the way she came, gently. He ran upstairs to the guest room. The door was slightly open. Inside, the closet was empty, the bed made, as if no one had ever slept there, except for one small detail. On the pillow sat Oliver's stuffed dinosaur, the one she saved from the storm. Nick picked it up with both hands, took a deep breath. His throat Date as if swallowing stones. Why Emily? He murmured, more to himself than to the world. On the stairs, he heard small footsteps. It was Oliver, still in his pajamas, hair messy, eyes sleepy. He stopped halfway down the steps, rubbing his eyes. "Daddy, where's Emily?" Nick knelt down, trying to steady his voice. "She had to go, son. But wasn't she gonna stay with us forever?" The boy rushed down the last steps and hugged his father's legs. "She said she'd teach me how to swim when summer got here." Nick closed his eyes, swallowing the knot rising hard in his throat. "I know, son. I know." Oliver stepped back a bit, his small hands gripping his father's arm. "She's coming back, right?" Nick didn't have the courage to lie. He just looked at his son with teary eyes and said what his heart was screaming. "I won't let her disappear." It was the first real promise he'd made in a long time. A promise that had nothing to do with business, contracts, or profit. A promise made with the soul. Later, alone in his office, Nicholas stared at the note again, now laid flat on the desk. The wrinkled paper carried the sad poetry of someone who learned to survive before they ever learned to dream. "Some flowers weren't made for greenhouses," he repeated softly. But inside him, something was growing, a certainty. Emily was the most beautiful flower he had ever known, and he refused to let her wilt far away. The search, in that moment, had begun. The city felt colder since she left. In the Bradford mansion, hours were no longer measured by meetings or phone notifications. Now, time was counted by silences. The silence of the too tidy guest room, the silence in the library without Emily's soft voice reading to Oliver, the silence of the mornings without the smell of cinnamon coffee. But more than anything, the silence in Nicholas's heart. 2 days had passed since he found the note, and with it came a certainty. She didn't run away. She gave up on something she might never have believed she deserved: love, belonging, a safe place. And he, who never chased anything beyond goals and profits, now found himself lost in a map with only one direction: Emily. On the morning of the third day, Nicholas got up earlier than usual. He got dressed in a hurry without calling the staff. He came down the stairs with his phone in hand, deleting appointments, declining calls. His assistant kept asking, "Are you leaving town, Mr. Bradford? Do you need security? Do you need—" "I need her," he replied bluntly, before hanging up. He took the car himself. Driving alone was rare, almost intimate. But he needed that steering wheel in his hands, the wet road ahead, the silence forcing him to face his own ghosts. The first stop was the nursing home. The place still smelled of lavender lotion and warm soup. The worn walls and stuffy hallways were a far cry from everything he knew. But that's where she used to work, where she smiled even when life seemed too hard. "Emily doesn't work here anymore," said a nurse, friendly but wary. "But Mrs. Campbell, she was very close to her." Nicholas went to the garden and saw her. Sitting in an iron chair, wrapped in an old pink shawl, the elderly woman looked at a dried-up rose bush. "She was a flower," the old woman said, without him even having to ask. "Delicate, but grown on stone." Nicholas approached, bending slightly before her. "Do you know where she went?" "She said she needed air, said flowers like her don't last under a glass roof, that they wanted her to shine, but only the right way." "And what's the right way?" Nicholas asked, almost in a whisper. The woman looked him in the eyes with the wisdom of a lifetime of loss. Her way. He left heavier and more determined. He visited the youth shelter where Emily had spent part of her teen years. The building was old but clean. On the entryway wall, a framed photo showed young people holding symbolic diplomas. And there she was, Shorter hair, shy smile, and those same intense eyes. "She came by a few days ago," the coordinator said. "Brought a bag of toys and books, said she couldn't carry too many memories. She was starting over. Again." Nicholas got back in the car, driving through streets he had never noticed. Simple parks, small squares, each unfamiliar face held a thread of hope. But nothing. Night fell, and with it, exhaustion. Then, as he stopped at a red light on Maple Street, he looked out the window and saw a simple sign. A small cafe with a brick facade and white curtains in the window. Inside, the atmosphere looked warm and intimate, and at the counter, there she was, Emily. There was no doubt, even from a distance, even with a beige apron and her bun coming undone, even without makeup or her usual bright laugh, it was her. His heart pounded. For a moment he thought about turning back, about letting her start over without him. But it was too late for that, and too early to give up. He walked in. The doorbell rang as he pushed the glass door open. The smell of fresh coffee and just-baked bread filled his senses. A few people were speaking quietly. No one noticed him, except her. Emily looked up, drying a cup with a towel, and froze. The world seemed to stop. She blinked once, then again, her chest rose. "Nick?" He didn't answer, just walked to an empty table right in front of the counter and sat down. His hands on the table steady, his eyes on hers. She hesitated. For a second, she thought about running out the back door. But her body stayed, frozen. Her legs gave out, and she sat across from him. Her eyes said everything her mouth couldn't form yet. "Why did you—" He cut in softly. "Because I can't survive without the sound of your voice in my house anymore." Emily bit her lower lip. The tears began to rise, slow, like a tide impossible to hold back. "You didn't have to come. I didn't want you to—" "But I had to," he interrupted, reaching out his hand. She looked at it for long seconds, and then, as if something inside her finally gave way, she placed her hand over his. That's when she cried. She cried like never before, like someone carrying the pain of never being seen, of not being enough, of not believing that love could also be for those who came from the ground. Nicholas squeezed her hand, eyes watery, voice choked. "You think you're too small for this world, but to me, you're what it's been missing." Emily tried to smile, but the tears won. There at that simple cafe table, smelling of hope and sweet bread, two worlds that had once been far apart met again, not as boss and employee, not as a rich man and a simple woman, but as souls that had finally recognized each other. The days that followed their reunion at the cafe were quiet and slow. Emily had begun speaking to Nicholas again, but with a delicate, almost fragile tone, like someone afraid of touching a wound that hadn't fully healed. She didn't return to the mansion, not yet. Nick respected her space. He didn't insist, he didn't pressure her, but he didn't distance himself either. He was always there, with short messages, quiet phone calls, or simply picking her up from work and dropping her off at home without saying more than good night. And still everything between them pulsed. Deep down they both knew this love wasn't born from glances. It was born from absence, from pain, from the shared silence that only two broken hearts could understand. But there was something that needed to happen. Something stuck between them since that day in the garden rain. An interrupted gesture, a kiss left hanging. That's when Nicholas decided it was time to go back to the beginning and start again. He sent the message that morning, today, at the park, 5 o'clock, where it all began. Emily read it during her break at work. Her heart beat faster, just seeing his name. A mix of anxiety and fear ran through her like a chill. Was it a goodbye? A declaration? Just a sweeter kind of farewell? But something inside her said, go. At 4:40, Emily was walking alone through Zilker Park. The breeze blew gently, carrying dry leaves that danced in the air like memories of everything already said, and everything still waiting to be spoken. She wore a simple light blue dress and a thin jacket. Her light brown hair flowed freely, moving with the wind. The park was quiet, with a few children playing in the distance and couples strolling slowly. But the bench, the same bench where she had met Oliver and then Nicholas, was empty. She walked up and sat down, taking a deep breath. The view in front of her was familiar, but it carried a different weight now. It held memories. She remembered the first meeting, the shy look from the boy, the shadow of the man who had watched her. She remembered the touch in the dark, the near surrender in the garden, and the fear that always followed her, fear of not being enough, of being just a passing moment in someone else's bigger world. The sky was beginning to change, color when she heard footsteps. She didn't look right away, but she felt it. He was there. Nicholas approached silently. He wore a blue shirt rolled at the sleeves, dark jeans, and his hair combed in a simple, unpretentious way. No shine of a businessman, no weight of a last name, just him, vulnerable. He stopped beside her. For a second, they didn't say anything. "You knew I'd come," she said finally. "I did, but I was still afraid." She smiled slightly. "Me too." He sat down slowly, leaving space between them, enough to show respect, enough to say, "I'm here." "Emily," he began, looking at the golden horizon. "I spent my whole life surrounded by people who told me what I wanted to hear, but you were the first who had the courage to walk away." She lowered her face, her trembling fingers resting on her knees. "I left because I thought I was too small to stay." Nicholas turned to her. His eyes were moist, but steady. "You're not small. I was the one who was blind. I hid behind perfection, routine, the things I could control. But you messed it all up. You showed me there's love outside of spreadsheets, that there's life beyond what I can predict." She looked at him, feeling her chest tighten. "Do you realize what you're saying, what you're asking of me?" "I'm asking you for courage," he answered. "Courage to stay, because I've realized I can lose contracts, money, status. But if I lose you again, I lose myself too." Emily swallowed hard. The tears threatened to fall, but she held them back with dignity. Nicholas held out his hand. The gesture was as simple as it was necessary. She hesitated for a fraction of a second, and then took it. "You're the home I never knew I was looking for," he whispered. She smiled, and in that smile there was surrender. She surrendered to what she felt. She surrendered to the chance to be truly loved. Then, with the sun sinking behind the trees, Emily leaned in, slowly, their faces close. The silence around them was almost sacred. No words were spoken, just a deep, intense gaze full of everything that hadn't yet been confessed. And then she kissed him. Their lips touched gently at first, like they were recognizing each other, but then the kiss deepened. It grew in meaning, in truth, in weight. It was a kiss filled with the past, with pain, with promises, a kiss that carried everything they were and everything they were ready to become. For a moment, time stopped. The city around them carried on, but there, on that wooden bench, in the same spot where chance had brought them together, two hearts were finally living what they had postponed out of fear. When they pulled apart, Emily rested her forehead against his and closed her eyes. "Are you still afraid of the silence?" Nicholas smiled with his eyes. "No, since you came. It's never come back." Emily hesitated for a moment before stepping through the iron gates of the Bradford mansion. Even after everything, the reunion, The kiss in the park, the whispered words that rebuilt her world. There was still a voice inside her whispering old fears. What if she wasn't enough? What if it didn't last? What if it was all too beautiful to be real? But Nicholas's hand, gently squeezing hers as they walked together to the front door, dissolved those doubts with the warmth of presence. At the entrance, the house looked the same. The high chandeliers, the polished wooden floors, the windows with elegant curtains. But to her, everything now had a new meaning. It was no longer the palace where she didn't belong. It was the place they had chosen to build something together. And simply walking in with him, hand in hand, was already a victory. Oliver, seeing her walk in with a suitcase, ran over with wide eyes and a huge smile only a child can give. He threw himself into her arms so hard it nearly knocked her over. "Are you sleeping here tonight?" he asked, eyes shining. "Tonight. And every night, if you'll let me," Emily replied, laughing and ruffling the boy's hair. Nicholas watched them in silence, eyes filled with emotion. They were just two, but together they felt like the whole world. The news, of course, spread quickly. It's not every day that the CEO of one of Texas's most influential companies publicly begins a relationship with a former nursing home caregiver who came from a past with no last name. The tabloids covered it all. The quiet scandal, her simple clothes, the years in shelters, the lack of a college degree, the fact that she didn't have social media. As if all of it were an offense to the polished world around him. The headlines ranged from venomous to mocking: "Wildflower in the rich man's garden," "Nicholas Bradford's new love," "Fairy tale or passing whim." Who is Emily Dawson? Everything about the woman no one knew. Until now, Emily read a few. Cried at the first, got angry at the second, but at the third, she took a deep breath and turned off her phone. Because at that exact moment, Nicholas walked into the kitchen, barefoot, hair tousled, still in a t-shirt, and wrapped her in a silent hug. Then he kissed her forehead with the calm of someone saying, "I'm here." "They talk because they don't know what real love is," he murmured. "And I'm not going to let you face it alone. Never." Every day, Nicholas made sure to show she was part of that home. When he got back from meetings, he didn't take off his blazer first. He looked for Emily. He sat beside her on the couch while she read a book. Sometimes they didn't say anything. They just were. Together. And that was everything. Oliver, meanwhile, was blossoming. He laughed louder again. Slept with his bedroom door open because he knew Emily was there in the room next door. Sometimes he brought her drawings saying, "I made this because now the house is happy." But what Emily loved most were the nights when the house fell silent and the outside world felt as distant as a dream. Nicholas would show up with 2 mugs of hot chocolate and place his phone on the grand piano in the living room. There, a single recorded track would play through the speakers, Oliver singing off-key and sweet, a melody he had made up with Emily's help. In the background of the recording you could hear him tapping on the piano, missing chords and laughing. It was to that soundtrack that they danced. Slowly, as if they were inventing time, Nicholas would place one hand on her waist and hold her hand firmly with the other. Emily would rest her head on his shoulder and close her eyes. They moved gently, spinning in the middle of the room, as if that floor were the only safe place in the world. "I feel alive here," she said one night, eyes still closed. "Because you are life," he replied, kissing her hair. "And you brought that to this place. You brought light, laughter, love." She cried, but not from pain. She cried because, for the first time, she belonged. Not even the cruel comments from Austin's high society bothered her anymore. She had learned to see herself through Nicholas's eyes, and more than that, through Oliver's eyes, who called her "my Emily," with the natural ease of someone who knows love doesn't need to be explained. It's felt. One morning, as they had breakfast in the garden, she looked at him softly and said, "If you want, we can go out less for a while." To avoid gossip, the pictures, he took her hand firmly, looking into her eyes. "Emily, I waited a lifetime to have someone like you. I'm not going to hide you to fit into their world. If necessary, let them be the ones who are uncomfortable, because you're not my shame, you're my courage." She smiled, her eyes teary, her heart light, and in that house once marked by loss and silence, there was now music, laughter, and dancing footsteps. There was the smell of cake baking, children's laughter in the hallway, books left open on the library armchair, and there was love, love out in the open, and most of all, love that no longer needed to hide. The mansion's garden was delicately decorated that Saturday morning. White, green, and gold balloons swayed gently in the breeze. An inflatable castle took up the left corner, while a long table covered in homemade cake, decorated cupcakes, and fresh juices waited for the guests. But the most special detail was in the simplicity. Everything had been lovingly prepared by Emily, Nicholas, and Oliver. Together. It was Oliver's 6th birthday, but at that party, something bigger was being celebrated, a new beginning, a new family, and a love that had overcome everything. Emily wore a cream-colored dress made of light fabric that flowed around her legs. Her brown hair was loose over her shoulders, and the smile on her lips was serene, full of peace. She walked among the children, helping serve the cake, adjusting party hats, laughing like someone who had finally found her place in the world. Nicholas, in light pants and a rolled-up blue shirt, watched from afar. The sun lit the edges of his face, and his eyes never left her. Every move Emily made was a living reminder of how lucky he was. She was no longer a temporary presence. She was roots. She was home. Oliver ran up to him, hair messy and t-shirt stained with frosting. "Dad, it's time. It's time. You're going to talk, right?" Nicholas laughed, straightening the boy's collar. "Yes, champ. Now it's my turn." He stepped up onto a small wooden platform, improvised as a stage beside the cake, while the guests settled into chairs and cushions on the grass. Emily approached, eyes curious, not knowing what he was about to say, but something in his tone when he looked at her made her heart race. Nicholas cleared his throat and looked around. His voice was steady, but filled with emotion. "I know everyone expects me to say something about Oliver's birthday, and yes, he's the star of the party, the reason we're all here. But today I want to talk about what happened to my life since he was born, and especially since Emily came into it." He paused briefly. The silence was complete. Even the wind seemed to stop to listen. "For years, I tried to be everything, the perfect father, the unbeatable boss, the man who never messes up. But really, I was just someone trying not to. It'll fall apart, and it was in that broken place that she came in." He looked at Emily, a woman with no famous last name, no fortune, no dazzling resume, but with the truest heart I've ever known. Emily raised a hand to her mouth, trying to hold back tears. She came into our life asking for nothing, demanding no place, and yet she gave us everything: laughter, peace, presence, love. Nicholas took a deep breath and finished, voice breaking. "True love isn't measured by status. It's recognized in silence, in a gentle touch, in a sincere hug, in the way she saw my son when all I could see was pain, in the way she taught me that not everything needs fixing. Sometimes you just need to love." Everyone applauded. A few people discreetly wiped away tears. Emily, on the other hand, cried openly, unashamed. And on her face there was no longer insecurity, no fear, only the certainty that she had finally stopped being the sweet stranger from the park and had become the love of someone's life. Later, as the sun began to dip behind the trees and the children slept on cushions scattered across the lawn, Nicholas found her sitting alone, barefoot, eyes lost in the golden light of dusk. "Are you okay?" he asked, approaching with a gentle smile. She looked at him and smiled back. For the first time, I'm home. He sat beside her and took her hand. And this time, you're staying. Emily nodded. Now I know. I was made to stay. And so between the distant sound of the wind and the last laughter echoing through the garden, the silence said everything. And they understood without needing to say another word. So, what did you think of this story? Leave your rating from 0 to 10 in the comments and tell me which part moved you the most. If this story touched your heart, like this video, share it with someone special and subscribe to the channel to hear many more stories like this one. Before you go, I've picked another touching story that just might reach a part of you that's still waiting to be seen. I'll be waiting for you. There,